All right, so we've got some really cool functionality inside our Todoist app, and we are now fully persisting all of our data using Realm. So now that we've set up most of the backend and our data storage solution, it's time to think about how we can improve the front end. And we're going to do just a few things to make our app a little bit easier on the eye. Because at the moment, truth be said, it is a very lean looking app. And ideally, I kind of need to be able to delete categories if I no longer want them. And at the moment, we don't really have any of that functionality because inside our table view delegate methods, when we tap on any of the rows, we need to take the user to the to-do list view controller, the next view controller. And so we can't really use that to delete the categories. So what else can we do? Well, we can implement something similar to what you see in your mail app. You can reveal the delete button, and if you swipe a little bit further, you can actually automatically delete the contents of that cell. So let's think about how we can implement this. And as always, you will usually find that CocoaPods is going to be your best friend. One of the things I regularly do before I program anything UI or front-end related is to just go window shopping on CocoaPods. So other people like going to the mall, I like going on CocoaPods. So let's go ahead and search for something like Swipe. You can look through each of these libraries. So let's have a look at the first one. You can see that it's got a cute little animation where it shows you what the library is capable of doing. And you can see that this is pretty much a copy of the mail app functionality that we were talking about just now. So this is brilliant. We found what we wanted in just one search. So let's go over to the GitHub page and see how we can implement and use this. So they've got a whole bunch of demos in terms of the different transition styles and expansion styles and requirements, and it also shows you how you can install it pretty easily. So all we need is just to pod swipe cell kit. So we know all about that. So let's go ahead and implement it. So I'm going to close down my project here. I'm going to open up terminal. So let's go ahead and cd to it. So the containing folder is currently on my desktop. So I'm going to say cd towards here. And then I'm going to tag on another command, and that's going to be open podfile-a using the application Xcode. And we're not initializing a new pod file because we've already done so in order to use Realm. So if I hit enter, it should find the right directory and open up my pod file. So the pod that I'm going to add here is going to be pod swipe cell kit. And if you want to minimize typos, then just go ahead and paste it in. And we're going to hit save, and we're going to close this down, and we're going to say pod install. And we'll let that run in the background. All right, so pods are installed. And now we can open up our Xcode workspace, and we can work on it using our swipe cell kit. So let's go ahead and implement it for our category view controller. So before we do anything, we of course first have to import the library that we're using, which is called Swipe Cell Kit. And Xcode is, again, as always, being a little bit obstructive, but we just need to hit it with a stick by using Command B, and that should allow it to figure out where the files for this Swipe Cell Kit pod exists. Now, even though I've done this a few times, I just want to show you how you might use the documentation of these libraries to learn to use new libraries and new frameworks, and it's really simple. So let's scroll down to the documentation. The first thing that it says is set the delegate property on swipe table view cell. And it's given us a little bit of example code, so I'm just going to copy and paste this over here so that we can refer to it. So let's put this over here, and we'll just comment it out in case we mistakenly keep it in there or something. So the first thing that you notice is that they dequeue a reusable cell with a particular identifier, and we've got all of that. And it also wants to downcast it as a swipe table view cell. So let's go ahead and do that. as swipe table view cell. There we go. Now I'm going to actually collapse my left hand side so my text doesn't wrap and you can see it more clearly this way. And then the next thing they have is they set the cell's delegate to self. So let's go ahead and do that as well. And we'll do it down here. Cell.delegate equals self. So that's the current view controller. And you should be reminded that whenever we're setting delegate on anything, we probably have to move up here and do something with the protocol. So let's read on. And as you can see, it says adopt the swipe table view cell delegate protocol. So let's copy that and let's go over here and paste it in here. Swipe table view cell delegate. Now, as I mentioned before, whenever you find yourself putting in new delegates, then it's usually a good time to put in an extension. So in our category view controller, we don't actually yet have any extensions, so we can go ahead and create a new one. So outside the entire class, we're going to go and create a new extension. So we'll just call it extension, and it's going to extend category view controller. And the reason why we're extending it is because we want to use this swipe table view cell delegate. So this is going to be the section that we're going to deal with all the swipe cell delegate methods. And just above it then, it's a good point to make a pragma mark and say this is our swipe cell delegate methods. And you can see we split up our entire view controller very nicely with these sections and extensions. All right, so the first error we get is that category view controller does not conform to protocol swipe table view cell delegate. So we adopted this protocol in our category view controller, but we actually don't have the delegate methods that are required. So Xcode will add the protocol stubs if you want, or why don't we have a look back at the documentation and see what else is required. So the next function here is a table view method that allows you to edit actions for row. And this is something that comes from this swipe cell kit. So we can simply just copy this entire method and put it inside our extension. And we now have a delegate method, and that error goes away because this was the required delegate method. So what does this code do? Well, it's responsible for handling what should happen when a user actually swipes on the cells. And you can see the first thing is to check and make sure that the orientation of the swipe is from the right. And then we have this closure that handles what should happen when the cell gets swiped. And finally, we add an image to that part of the cell that's going to show when we swipe on the cell. And then we return this delete action as the response to a user swiping on the cell. So we don't actually currently have an image called delete inside our asset.exe assets. We actually have nothing in here so far. But no matter, because we can get it straight from SwipeCellKit's example app. Now you can actually download and git clone the entire app to have a look at their example, but in my case I'm just going to go into the example folder and then mail example. I'm going to go into their assets.exe assets, and I'm going to find the image set called trash, and there is something here called trashicon.png, and here I'm going to right click and I'm going to save image into my downloads folder. So now that I've downloaded this thing called trash icon, I'm just going to rename it to delete icon. And that way it makes a little bit more sense rather than having the space in the name. And you'll see very soon why. And once you've renamed it, then you can safely drag it into your assets.exe assets folder in the left-hand pane here. So we're going to put that in there, and I'm going to adjust it to the 2x position because it's actually a 2x image. Now, the next thing I want to do is go back into my category view controller, and I'm going to change the name to whatever I called it just now. And just to remind ourselves, it's called delete-icon. So I'm going to call it delete-icon. icon. So now what should happen is that when I run my app and I land on the category view controller, when I swipe from the right of the cell, then I should be able to trigger this closure. And inside here, and at this point, I want to print item deleted. Now, obviously nothing's being deleted, but we're just testing our code out here. And when I do swipe, it should show me the delete icon as an image and the delete text underneath that icon. Now, at this point, you might think that you can run your app, but if you do, the app will actually crash. Let's investigate why that is. What's the reason for the crash? When we run our app, you will get this error and it will crash your app. Now, the reason for this is because it says could not cast, i.e. it could not turn a UI table view cell into a swipe table view cell. So how can we fix this issue? Well, let's first stop our app and go into our main.storyboard. So here, what we can do is we can select our category cell and have a look on the right-hand pane. If we go inside the identity inspector, we can specify a class that it should inherit from and also a module where that class is located. So here, instead of having it as a UI table view cell, we can say that it is a swipe table view cell and hit enter. And then we're going to change the module to swipe cell kit and hit save. So let's go ahead and hit run and see if that fixes our problem. Right, so our app no longer crashes, but it looks exactly the same as what we used to have. But now these cells are actually no longer UI table view cells. They are in fact swipe table view cells because that's what we changed its class to. So if we click and swipe to the left, you can see that we've got this trash icon and the delete message showing. Now it's a little bit cramped in here because our cell is actually pretty short. So why don't we go back and increase the size of our cell? So let's go into view did load and let's say table view dot row height equals, let's say 80. So that makes it 80 points high. And let's run our app again and see if we've made it a little bit better. So a lot of UI stuff, you'll find yourself tweaking back and forth, running back and forth, just so that you can see visually whether if you're happy with the effect. So now that looks pretty nice, right? And each of our items get a little bit more space and it doesn't look so bunched up anymore. So, all right, I'm pretty happy with that. So let's test the functionality. When I click on the delete button, I'm expecting this closure to happen and my print line to be executed. And indeed it does. Every single time I click on the delete button, then it gets deleted. Now, it's no good just printing item deleted into the console. The user can't see that. So let's go ahead and replace this print statement with some real code. And as it suggests, handle the action by updating our model with deletion. So as a challenge, I'd like you to pause the video and see if you can figure out how to use the index path that we get back that's going to tell us which row was swiped upon, and inside here, which row was selected to be deleted when the user taps on that red button, and to use all of that information to delete the correct category from our list of categories here. So pause the video and give that a try. All right, so how did that go? Well, as you know, we're going to be adding the code in here because it says that's where we should handle the action. And this is the closure that gets called when the user swipes on the cell and clicks on the delete button. So inside here is where we're going to use our realm.write in order to update our realm. And the update that we want to make is we want to say realm.delete, and the object we want to delete is the item at indexpath.row, so the row that was swiped on, And we're going to look inside this collection of results that we've called categories and remove the category at that index path. So we're going to say delete categories at index path dot row. Now, of course, realm.write can throw, so we're going to wrap it inside a do catch block. And then we're going to mark realm.write with a try keyword. So the categories here is, if you remember, an optional. So we have to somehow safely deal with it. So we can use optional binding to handle this. So if we say if let category for deletion equals categories question mark to optional chain index path dot row, then inside here we can perform the do catch block. And instead of deleting that, we can delete the category for deletion. Now, because some of these are global variables and we're using it inside our closure here, then we have to add self in front of them to explicitly say that they belong to the current class. Now, finally, if all of that succeeded, then we can go ahead and make a call to tableview.reload data so that we call our data source methods and remove the last cell because it no longer exists inside our Realm database. So let's give our app a go and run it to see what happens. All right, so we are going to add a new category. Not feeling very imaginative today. And go ahead and hit add. And we're going to click and drag and click delete. And there we go. Now it's gone. All thanks to SwipeCellKit and our little bit of code. So you might have noticed in our current version of the app that it's not quite the same as the Mail app, because in the Mail app, when you click and drag, you can actually drag further and just delete the entire cell by that one swipe gesture. At the moment, you have to do two gestures. You have to swipe and then delete. So how can we implement the same thing that we have inside the Mail app? Well, let's head back over to the documentation and continue reading. So it says that optionally, you can implement the edit actions options for row at method. Now that's a horribly named method, but it does allow us to customize the behavior of the swipe actions. And one of the options that we can specify is the expansion style. If we have a look up here at the demos, we can see that the expansion style for destructive is exactly what we want, right? Where if you swipe further, then the delete action gets called without you having to tap on any of the other buttons. So let's go ahead and copy this block of code over to our code. And we're going to put it below this delegate method here. So right here. Now there's two options that were specified in the documentation. One is the expansion style and one is a transition style. So let's have a look at what that border transition style looks like up here. So you can see that in the demo, there's 4 different transition styles that they show, and border basically just allows all the buttons to show up and increase in size at the same time, rather than drag or reveal. So this is not something that we care about too much right now, so I'm actually just going to delete that line of code. And all I'm interested in is this destructive behavior. Now, before we run our app, it's really important to realize this option will try to remove the last row from your table view. So before we can run our app, let's go ahead and delete this reload data that we added previously. Now we're ready to go ahead and run our app and see if it works. All right, so let's add a new category, hit add, and then we're going to click and drag a little bit, and you can see that we've got that delete button show up. And then we're going to click and drag it a lot, and you can see the entire cell simply disappears. And our previous behavior still works. We can still swipe it a little bit and then click delete to remove it as well. And it's got a pretty neat animation when the library removes that row, as you can see when you do this, right? It just shrinks it down. So that is all thanks to this destructive expansion style. And all we had to do is put in, 5 or 6 lines of code for all of that to work. So that's pretty neat, right? Now, what about our to-do list view controller? What if we could have both the behavior of our checking and unchecking, as well as being able to delete items? Wouldn't that be neat? So in that case, we would be able to click on the cell to check it, and we would be able to click and swipe it to just get rid of it. Because sometimes you want to see the tasks that you've ticked off, and sometimes, you're so done with them that you just want to delete them. So how can we implement that here? Now, you might realize that all that you need is pretty much this extension, right? And you could theoretically copy and paste it over here because it's much the same functionality that we need. But as always, when you're copying and pasting large blocks of code, you should think to yourself, is there a better way of doing this? How can I keep my code more dry? So in the next lesson, we're going to tackle this by creating a superclass that we're going to inherit from. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson.